Hi, I'm Morgan. I built my dream house from the ground up, only to have my parents convince me to sign it over temporarily during a family crisis. 3 months later, they moved my sister's entire family in without asking. When I tried to reclaim what was mine, they served me with a restraining order. That's when I realized some people will twist love into a weapon if you let them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass as I pulled into the driveway of the house I'd built with my own hands, and a construction crew, but every nail, every fixture, every design choice had been mine. The red brick Colonial with white trim and black shutters stood proudly against the backdrop of maple trees just beginning to turn. This house represented 5 years of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and careful budgeting. It was my sanctuary. Except today, it didn't feel like mine anymore. I checked my phone again. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and a string of text messages that ranged from guilt-laden to outright angry. "We need to talk about the house situation," the last one read, as if my home was just a situation to be managed. My fiancé Daniel's SUV pulled in behind me. He got out, adjusting his tie. He'd come straight from his engineering firm. The worry lines around his eyes deepened when he saw my expression. "You okay?" he asked, pulling me into a quick hug. "I'm about to confront my parents about moving Eliza and her family into my house without permission," I said. "So no, not really okay." He squeezed my shoulder. "I'm right here with you. Remember what we practiced?" I nodded, taking a deep breath. 3 months ago, when my father had a health scare, a minor heart attack that sent the family into panic mode, they'd convinced me to temporarily sign over the house to them. "Just a precaution," Mom had said, "in case there are medical bills or complications. We'll sign it back after your father recovers." It had made sense at the time. Dad needed peace of mind to focus on recovery, and I wanted to help. What I hadn't expected was coming back from a 3-week work assignment in Seattle to find my sister Eliza, her husband Connor, and their 3 kids moved into my house, with my belongings either boxed up in the garage or redistributed throughout, the rooms as if they were community property. The front door opened before we reached it. My mother, Patricia, stood in the doorway, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in her signature tight bun. Her smile was strained, her eyes darting between Daniel and me like she was calculating the threat level. "Morgan, sweetie, we've been trying to reach you," she said, not moving from the doorway. "I know, Mom. Can we come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Your father's resting. Try to keep it down." I bit back a retort about how it was my house, my rules. This wasn't the time for petty jabs. I needed strategy, not emotion. The interior of my home had transformed in just 3 weeks. The minimalist decor I'd carefully selected had been replaced with my sister's cluttered aesthetic. Throw pillows everywhere, toys scattered across the hardwood floors I'd splurged on, and family photos I didn't recognize hanging on walls that once displayed my travel photography. My sister Eliza emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, my dish towel, the one with Parisian landmarks that Daniel had bought me last Christmas. "Morgan, you should have told us you were coming," she said, as if I needed an invitation to enter my own house. "I didn't think I needed an appointment to visit my own home," I replied, keeping my voice level. Eliza's smile faltered. She was 2 years younger than me, but somehow had always been treated like she was more fragile, more deserving of protection and accommodation. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and she wore what looked like my University of Michigan sweatshirt. "Don't start, Morgan," my mother warned. "Your father needs calm right now." "Where is all my stuff?" I asked, noticing more and more of my possessions repurposed around the room. My reading chair now held a basket of children's toys. My antique desk was covered with my niece's art supplies. "We had to make some space," Eliza said, shrugging. "Most of your things are in the garage or the guest room. The important stuff, anyway." Daniel placed a steadying hand on my back. I could feel his silent support, reminding me to stay focused. "I think we need to talk about the arrangement here," I said carefully. "When I signed the house over, it was with the understanding that it was temporary, just to help with Dad's medical situation. Not for you to move Eliza's family in." My mother's face hardened. "Your father's recovery is going to take time, Morgan. The doctors say stress is the worst thing for him right now. Having the grandkids close by has been wonderful for his spirits." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. "And our lease was up," Eliza added. "It just made sense. This house has so much extra space for just you, and you're barely even here with all your traveling." The casual entitlement in her voice made my blood simmer. This house, with its 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, hadn't been gifted to me. I'd worked 60-hour weeks as an architectural consultant for 5 years to afford it, designed every inch myself, and chosen this neighborhood specifically for its proximity to the lake where I love to kayak on weekends. "I travel for work," I said. "That doesn't mean I don't live here. This is my home." A door opened down the hall and my father appeared. Thomas Hayes had always been a big man with a commanding presence, but the heart attack had diminished him somehow. His shoulders seemed narrower, his face more drawn. Still, there was a sharpness in his eyes I recognized all too well. "What's all this commotion?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Dad, you should be resting," Eliza said immediately, rushing to his side like he might collapse at any moment. "I'm fine," he said, waving her off. "Morgan, Daniel, didn't know you were coming by." "Clearly," I said. "Dad, we need to talk about the house situation." My father's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. There was a calculation happening behind his eyes. "What's there to talk about? We're family. We help each other out." "Yes, and I helped by temporarily signing over the house for your medical needs. Not for you to move Eliza and Connor in without even asking me." My father exchanged a look with my mother. It was quick, but I caught it. They'd been prepared for this conversation. "Morgan," he said, in the reasonable tone he always used. When he was about to be completely unreasonable, "Your sister needed a place to stay. Their landlord sold their building, and with 3 kids, they couldn't find anything affordable on short notice. This house has plenty of room." "That's not the point, Dad. It's my house. You should have asked me." "Technically," my mother interjected, "the house is in our names right now. We're just making the best use of the family resources." The word "technically" hit me like a slap. I'd signed the papers because they'd framed it as a necessary precaution during a medical crisis, not as a transfer of ownership that gave them the right to make decisions about my property. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I think?" What Morgan is trying to say is that there was an understanding about the temporary nature of the arrangement. Moving Eliza's family in without consultation changes that understanding significantly. My father's gaze hardened as he looked at Daniel. He'd never quite warmed to my fiancé, despite Daniel's consistent efforts. I'd always suspected it was because Daniel encouraged my independence, whereas my parents preferred me pliable and accommodating. "This is a family matter, Daniel," my father said dismissively. "Daniel is family," I countered. "We're getting married in 5 months, and this house is meant to be our home." Eliza made a small, distressed sound. "But where are we supposed to go? We've already enrolled the kids in the school district here. Jamie just made the soccer team." I felt the familiar weight of family expectations settling on my shoulders. The unspoken rule had always been clear. Eliza's needs came first. When we were kids, it was Eliza who got the new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, despite our similar sizes. It was Eliza who got the college tuition paid in full, while I worked 2 jobs and took out loans. It was always Eliza. I understand you need a place to stay, I said, trying to remain reasonable. But this is my house. I designed it. I paid for it. I never agreed to give it up permanently, and I certainly never agreed to have you move in. Nobody's saying it's permanent, my mother said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Just until your father's fully recovered and Eliza and Connor can find something suitable. And how long will that be? I asked. Another exchanged glance between my parents. My stomach tightened. Well, my father said, the cardiologist says it could be a year before I'm back to full strength. And the housing market is tight, right? Now, a year. They were planning to keep my house for at least a year, maybe longer. The realization sent a cold shock through me. That's not what I agreed to, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I signed those papers to help during an emergency, not to give you my house indefinitely. Lower your voice, my mother hissed. Your father doesn't need this stress. I don't need the stress of being homeless either, I shot back. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Eliza said with an eye roll. You're welcome to stay in the guest room any time. It's still your house, too. The guest room? In my own house? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where are all my things? My furniture? My clothes? We had to make room for the kids' things, my mother explained, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Your old bedroom is Jamie's now, and the second bedroom is for the twins. Your clothes are in some bins in the garage, I think. The important ones, anyway. Daniel's hand tightened on my back. I could feel his tension matching my own. This isn't right, I said firmly. I want the house transferred back to me, and I want a reasonable timeline for Eliza and her family to find their own place. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. My father's face darkened. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and Eliza's eyes welled with tears, right on cue. After everything we've done for you, my father said, his voice dangerously low, this is how you repay us? By throwing your sister and her children out on the street? I'm not throwing anyone out on the street, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'm asking for my house back and a reasonable timeline. We're not discussing this now, my mother cut in. Your father needs to rest, and you clearly came here looking for a fight. Maybe when you've calmed down and thought about what family really means, we can talk again. I felt a familiar sensation washing over me. The invalidation, the dismissal, the way they could always frame me as the unreasonable one for having perfectly reasonable boundaries. I am calm, I insisted. I'm just being clear about what I want. What you want, my father repeated, as if the very concept was offensive. What about what your sister needs? What about what your mother and I need during my recovery? What about what I need? I countered. This house is all I have. I worked for years to afford it. And we raised you for 18 years, my mother said sharply. Fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You think that didn't cost us? It was the same argument they always used when I tried to establish independence, the debt I supposedly owed them for my very existence. I appreciate everything you did for me growing up, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean I owe you my house. My father shook his head, disappointment etched in every line of his face. I thought we raised you better than this, Morgan. Family helps family. Yes, and I helped by signing over the house temporarily for medical reasons. Not for you to move Eliza in without asking me. We didn't think we needed permission to help your sister, my mother said. We thought you'd understand, being family and all. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This wasn't going anywhere. They weren't listening, and they weren't going to. 29 years of family dynamics had taught me that much. Okay, I said finally. I can see we're not going to resolve this today. But I want you to know that I expect the house to be transferred back to me, and I expect a plan for Eliza and Connor to find their own place. I'll give you 2 weeks to figure it out, and then I'm coming back with my lawyer. The word lawyer fell like a bomb in the room. Eliza gasped. My mother's eyes widened. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. You would sue your own family? He demanded. After everything we've done for you? I don't want to, I said honestly. But this is my house, Dad. I worked for it. I saved for it. I designed it. And I want it back. Get out, my father said, his voice trembling with anger. Get out of this house right now. The irony of being ordered out of my own home wasn't lost on me, but I could see that nothing productive would come from continuing this conversation. Fine, I said. 2 weeks, then I'm taking action. As Daniel and I turned to leave, I heard Eliza burst into tears. My mother's voice floated. After us. How could you be so selfish, Morgan? After everything we've done for you. I didn't turn back. I just kept walking, my heart pounding in my chest until we reached Daniel's car. Once inside, I let out a long, shaky breath. Daniel reached over and took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You did good in there, he said quietly. You stood your ground. Did I? I asked, doubt creeping in. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I should just let them have the house for a while. Dad is recovering, and Eliza does have 3 kids. Daniel turned to face me fully. Morgan, listen to me. You are not being selfish for wanting to keep the home you worked for and paid for. They manipulated you into signing it over during an emotional crisis, and now they're moving the goalposts. That's not okay. I nodded, but the guilt still gnawed at me. It was the result of years of conditioning. Eliza's needs first, family obligations above all. My desires always framed as selfish if they didn't align with my parents' plans. What if they're right? I whispered. What if I am a bad daughter? For not helping my sister? You've helped your sister plenty over the years, Daniel reminded me. You paid for her wedding when your parents couldn't. You loaned her money for the down payment on their last apartment. You've been generous. But giving up your house indefinitely? That's not reasonable, and deep down you know it. He was right. I had always been the one to step up, to give more, to accommodate. And it had never been enough. As we drove away from the house, my house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Guilt, yes, but also something else, something unfamiliar. Resolve. What now? Daniel asked as we turned onto the main road. I looked out the window at the fall leaves swirling in our wake. Now we get a lawyer. I want my house back. The next morning, I sat across from Alexandra Patel, a real estate attorney recommended by a colleague. Her office was small but meticulously organized, much like the woman herself. She reviewed the documents I'd brought, the original deed, the transfer papers I'd signed 3 months ago, and text messages between my parents and me discussing the temporary nature of the arrangement. So let me make sure I understand, she said, looking up from the papers. You signed over your house to your parents temporarily to help with your father's medical situation. There was a verbal agreement that they would transfer it back once he recovered. Now they've moved your sister and her family in without your permission and are indicating they plan to keep the arrangement for at least a year, possibly longer. That's right, I confirmed. And there's nothing in writing about the temporary nature of the transfer? I shifted uncomfortably. Just the text messages where we discussed it. I trusted them. They're my parents. Alexandra's expression softened slightly. Family situations can be complicated. Legally speaking, the house is currently in your parents' names. The text messages help establish your intent, but they're not as strong as a formal written agreement would have been. My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that, she replied. We have options. The first is to simply request that they honor the verbal agreement and transfer the property back. If they refuse, we can file a lawsuit claiming that the transfer was made under false pretenses, with a clear understanding that it was temporary. Would I win? She tilted her head. It depends on several factors. The text messages help our case. If you have any witnesses to conversations about the temporary nature of the arrangement, that would strengthen it further. Do you have any? I thought for a moment. Daniel was there for some of the conversations. And maybe my Aunt Laura. She was at the hospital when we first discussed it. Good. That helps. Also, who paid the mortgage after the transfer? I did, I said. It's still automatically withdrawn from my account each month. Alexandra. Made a note. That's significant. It suggests you maintained a financial interest in the property despite the transfer of the deed. What about the fact that I've been paying property taxes and insurance too? Even better, she said, making another note. Anything else that shows you continued to treat the property as your own? I thought about it. I've been paying the utilities too, and I have emails with contractors about some renovations I was planning for the kitchen. Those were sent after the transfer. She nodded approvingly. All of that helps establish that despite the legal transfer, you continue to act as the de facto owner, consistent with your claim that the transfer was intended to be temporary. For the first time since walking into my transformed house, I felt a flicker of hope. So what's the next step? I asked. I suggest we start with a formal letter outlining the facts as we understand them, and requesting that your parents honor the original agreement by transferring the property back. To you, we'll give them a reasonable deadline to respond, perhaps 2 weeks. If they don't comply, we can escalate to legal action. I nodded, though the thought of suing my own parents made my stomach churn. And if it does go to court? Alexandra leaned forward. Morgan, before we go further, I want to make sure you understand something. Legal battles with family members can be emotionally devastating, regardless of the outcome. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about my house, the space I'd created for myself after years of living in Eliza's shadow, the sanctuary I'd built with my own hard work, the future home where Daniel and I plan to start our life together. I don't want to sue my family, I said honestly, but I also can't let them take advantage of me like this. That house represents years of my life. I can't just give it up. Alexandra nodded. I understand. Let's start with the letter and see how they respond. Sometimes, just knowing you're serious and have legal representation is enough to change the dynamic. As I left her office with a plan in place, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. I'd never stood up to my family like this before. It had always been easier to give in, to be the good daughter who accommodated everyone else's needs. But this time, the stakes were too high. That evening, I received a text from Eliza. Mom and Dad told me what you said. I can't believe you'd put your own sister out on the street. After everything we've done for you. I stared at the message, trying to parse the everything my family had supposedly done for me. What came to mind instead was everything I'd done for them. The constant giving that was never quite enough. The sacrifices that were always taken for granted. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my Aunt Laura, my mother's sister, and the only family member who had ever seemed to see the dynamic clearly. Morgan, honey, she answered warmly. How are you holding up? Not great, I admitted. Did you hear what happened with the house? I heard Patricia's version, she said carefully, which I take with a grain of salt. Tell me your side. I explained the situation, the temporary transfer, the unilateral decision to move Eliza, in the confrontation. Laura sighed deeply. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but this fits the pattern, doesn't it? Your sister has always been the priority. Am I wrong to want my house back? I asked, the doubt creeping in again. Absolutely not, Laura said firmly. You worked hard for that house. It's yours. And for what it's worth, I remember very clearly your mother saying at the hospital that the transfer was just a precaution and temporary. They can't rewrite history now that it's convenient. Her words were like a balm to my frayed nerves. Would you be willing to put that in writing? My lawyer says it would help establish the intent of the transfer. Of course, Laura said without hesitation. I'll email you a statement tonight. And Morgan, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It's about time. After we hung up, I sat on the bed in the small apartment Daniel and I had rented temporarily, staring at the wall. It was stark white, impersonal. Nothing like the warm sage green I'd chosen for my bedroom at home. Daniel came in and sat beside me. You okay? I think so, I said. It just feels wrong, having to fight my own family for something that's rightfully mine. He put his arm around me. The fact that it feels wrong to you shows what kind of person you are, Morgan. But sometimes you have to fight for what's yours, even when it's hard. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. I'm going to get our house back, I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. The next day, Alexandra's letter went out by certified mail. It was formal, but not hostile, simply stating the facts and requesting that my parents honor our original agreement by transferring the house back to me within 2 weeks. I didn't hear anything for 5 days. Then, on the 6th day, a process server knocked on our apartment door. Morgan Hayes? He asked. Yes? He handed me an envelope. You've been served. Inside was a temporary restraining order, filed by my parents, claiming that I had threatened them during our last conversation and that they feared for their safety. The order prohibited me from coming within 500 feet of the house, my house, or contacting my parents directly. I stared at the document in disbelief. I hadn't threatened anyone. The conversation had been tense, yes, but at no point had I made any kind of threat. With shaking hands, I called Alexandra. They filed a restraining order against me, I said, my voice barely steady. They're claiming I threatened them. I swear I didn't. Slow down, Alexandra said calmly. This is actually not uncommon in property disputes between family members. It's a tactic to gain leverage and paint you as the aggressor. Do you have any witnesses to the conversation they're referring to? Daniel was there the whole time, I said. He can testify that I never threatened anyone. Good. We'll need his statement. In the meantime, obey the order completely. Don't go near the house. Don't contact your parents. Don't even respond to texts if they send any. We'll address this in court. I hung up, feeling a strange numbness spreading through me. My own parents had filed a false restraining order against me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Daniel found me sitting on the couch, still holding the document. What's that? He asked. Wordlessly, I handed it to him. He read it, his expression darkening with each line. This is ridiculous, he said finally. You never threatened anyone. I was right there. They're playing dirty, I said, the realization settling over me like a cold shadow. They're willing to lie about me, to paint me as dangerous just to keep my house. Daniel sat beside me, taking my hand. Then we fight back, with the truth. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house, not just as property, but as the physical manifestation of my independence, my success, my identity apart from my family's expectations. In designing that house, I had finally created something that was wholly mine, untouched by the family dynamic that had always diminished me. And now they had taken that too. As I stared at the ceiling, a new emotion began to replace the hurt and confusion. Anger. Clear, righteous anger that burned away the doubt and guilt that had plagued me for days. They had manipulated me during a family crisis. They had moved my sister in without my consent. They had dismissed my concerns and belittled my needs. And now they had lied about me, legally branded me as threatening, to maintain control. Enough was enough. The next morning, I called Alexandra with a new resolve in my voice. I don't want to just get my house back, I told her. I want to make sure they can never do anything like this again. What are my options? I could practically hear her smile through the phone. Now we're talking. Let me tell you what we're going to do. The restraining order felt like a physical weight in my hands. The official court seal stared back at me, transforming my parents from the people who raised me into strangers willing to lie under oath to get what they wanted. I placed the document on Alexandra's desk, watching as she reviewed it with practiced eyes. This is actually good for us, she said finally. I blinked. How is a restraining order against me good? Because it shows desperation, Alexandra explained, leaning forward. They know your claim is legitimate, so they're resorting to extreme measures. And false statements to the court come with consequences. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing. We'll file a response immediately, including Daniel's affidavit about what actually happened during that conversation. We'll also request an emergency hearing to get this restraining order dismissed. I nodded, trying to focus on the legal strategy instead of the hollow ache in my chest. My own parents had branded me a threat, the same parents who had taught me to always tell the truth, to respect authority, to value integrity above all. What about the house? I asked. One step at a time, Alexandra advised. First, we get this baseless restraining order thrown out. That damages their credibility for the property case. Then we push forward with our claim on the house. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from my sister, sent from a phone I didn't recognize. Mom and Dad said you're trying to force them out of the house now, too. I thought you just wanted me gone. Why are you doing this to our family? I stared at the message, marveling at how thoroughly they had twisted the narrative. In their version, I was the villain trying to evict everyone, rather than the rightful owner attempting to reclaim what was mine. I showed the text to Daniel when I got home. They're unbelievable, he said, shaking his head. They turn you into the bad guy for wanting your own house back. Should I respond? I asked. What did your lawyer say about contact? No direct communication with my parents because of the restraining order. She didn't mention Eliza specifically. Daniel thought for a moment. I still wouldn't. They're clearly working together, and anything you say to Eliza will get back. To your parents. It could be used against you somehow. He was right. I put the phone away without responding, though the urge to defend myself was almost overwhelming. That night, I dreamed of the house. In the dream, I was walking through empty rooms, calling out for someone, anyone. But no one answered. The walls seemed to stretch and contract, the familiar layout becoming a maze I couldn't navigate. I woke up sweating, the sense of loss following me into consciousness. Daniel stirred beside me. You okay? Just a dream, I murmured, but we both knew it was more than that. The next day, I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. As an architectural consultant, I was currently helping redesign a community center downtown. The project required focus and creativity, exactly what I needed to keep my mind off the house situation, at least temporarily. My colleague Mia noticed my intensity as I hunched over the blueprints. Everything. All right? She asked during our lunch break. You seem intense today. I hesitated. I hadn't told many people about what was happening, partly from embarrassment and partly because I still couldn't quite believe it myself. Family stuff, I said finally. It's complicated. Mia nodded, not pushing for details. Well, if you need to talk, I'm here. Or if you need to scream into the void, the supply closet has surprisingly good acoustics. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in days. I'll keep that in mind. That afternoon, Alexandra called. Good news and bad news, she said, without preamble. Which do you want first? Bad, I replied, bracing myself. The hearing for the restraining order is scheduled for next week. Until then, it remains in effect. I sighed. And the good news? I've done some digging into your parents' finances. Your father's medical bills were covered almost entirely by insurance, with a deductible of just $2,000. There was no financial emergency that necessitated transferring your house. I felt a chill run through me. So they lied about that too? It seems so. This strengthens our case that the transfer was obtained under false pretenses. Also, I've confirmed that they've already started the process to add your sister's name to the deed. What? The word came out as a whisper. They filed the paperwork last week. It hasn't been processed yet, but the intent is clear. They're trying to further complicate the ownership situation. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new betrayal. Can we stop it? I've already filed an objection based on our pending dispute. It should freeze any further transfers until our case is resolved. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at the blueprints before me. They had never intended to give the house back. The temporary arrangement had been a lie from the start, and now they were trying to bring Eliza into the legal ownership, making it even harder for me to reclaim what was mine. That evening, a knock at our apartment door startled me. Daniel opened it to find my Aunt Laura standing there, her expression grim. I hope it's okay that I stopped by, she said. Morgan wasn't answering her phone, and I needed to see her in person. I hadn't been avoiding her calls specifically. I'd been avoiding all calls, unable to face the questions and judgments that seemed to come from every direction. Of course, I said, ushering her in. What's going on? Laura took a seat on our small couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I had dinner with your mother last night. She told me about the restraining order. My stomach dropped. And? And I called her out on it, Laura said firmly. I told her I was there at the hospital when they asked you to sign over the house. I heard them promise it was temporary just until Thomas recovered. I reminded her that you've never been violent or threatening in your life. What did she say? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. She said sometimes people change when money and property are involved, that you've become unstable since Daniel came into your life. Laura rolled her eyes. It's nonsense of course. But Morgan, they're building a narrative, and they're getting other family members to buy into it. I sank into a chair, feeling the weight of what I was up against. They're turning the whole family against me. Not the whole family, Laura said firmly. I'm here, aren't I? And I've already talked to your cousins James and Tina. They're not buying it either. Her support meant more than I could express. Thank you, I managed. There's something else, Laura said, her expression shifting. I found out why they're so determined to keep the house. Daniel and I exchanged glances. Why? He asked. Connor lost his job 3 months ago. That's why they couldn't renew their lease. They couldn't afford it. Your parents have been helping them financially for months, but it strained their retirement savings. They saw your house as the solution. The pieces fell into place. The timing of my father's heart attack, the urgent need for me to sign over the house, the immediate move-in of Eliza's family. So this was never about Dad's health, I said slowly. It was about solving Eliza's financial problems, at my expense. Laura nodded sadly. I'm afraid so. And Morgan, there's more. Eliza is pregnant again. The news hit me like a physical blow. A 4th child would make it even harder for them to afford their own place, which meant they would cling to my house even more desperately. Why didn't they just ask for help? I wondered aloud. Why the manipulation, the lies, the restraining order? Because they knew what they were asking wasn't reasonable, Daniel said quietly. They knew you might say no if they were honest. And Eliza has always been the priority, I added, the familiar hurt rising again. They've always bent over backward to make her life easier, even at my expense. Laura reached over and squeezed my hand. I've written out everything I remember about the conversations at the hospital, and I've collected some old emails and family photos that might help your case, things that show the pattern of behavior. I looked at her gratefully. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she said firmly. Because it's the right thing to do. And because it's time someone in this family stood up for you, Morgan. After Laura left, Daniel and I sat in silence for a while, processing everything we'd learned. I keep thinking about all the times I gave in, I said finally. All the times I stepped aside for Eliza, all the times I helped them without question. I paid for her wedding. I loaned them money for their apartment deposit. I babysit the kids whenever they ask. And it's still not enough. Daniel moved to sit beside me on the couch, taking my hand in his. It's never going to be enough, Morgan. That's what you need to understand. No matter how much you give, they'll always expect more. Because I've always given in, I realized. I've trained them to expect it. It's not your fault, he insisted. You were being kind, generous, loving. They're the ones who took advantage. I leaned my head against his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. I'm not giving in this time. That house is mine, and I'm going to fight for it. We're going to fight for it, he corrected gently. You're not alone in this. The next morning, I received an email from Alexandra with the court date for the restraining order hearing. Wednesday, 9 a.m., just 5 days away. Attached was a draft of our response, including Daniel's affidavit describing what actually happened during the confrontation at the house. Reading his account, factual, straightforward, devoid of the emotional manipulation my parents had included in their filing, reminded me of the stark contrast between what had actually happened and the version my parents were presenting to the world. I forwarded the email to Laura, asking if she could attend the hearing for moral support. Her response came within minutes. Absolutely. I'll be there. And I've spoken to your cousin James. He wants to come too. The show of support brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I'd felt alone in recognizing the dynamics in our family. To have others validate what I was experiencing felt like a weight lifting, however slightly. That afternoon, I drove past my house, staying beyond the 500-foot limit required by the restraining order, but close enough to see it from a distance. A new swing set had appeared in the backyard, bright primary colors against the green grass. Eliza's minivan sat in the driveway alongside my father's sedan. The curtains I'd chosen had been replaced with something floral and fussy. It looked like someone else's home now. The realization sent a pang through me, but it also strengthened my resolve. I wouldn't let them erase me so easily. The day of the hearing arrived with a nervous energy that had me up before dawn. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, pulled my hair back into a neat bun, and applied minimal makeup. Alexandra had advised me to project calm, collected professionalism, the opposite of the unstable, threatening person my parents had described in their filing. Daniel, Laura, and my cousin James met us at the courthouse, their presence a solid reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Alexandra arrived moments later, her confidence reassuring as she guided us to the correct courtroom. My parents and their lawyer were already seated when we entered. My mother's eyes widened slightly when she saw Laura and James with me. But she quickly composed her features. My father stared straight ahead, not acknowledging me at all. There was no sign of Eliza, which didn't surprise me. She had always avoided direct conflict, preferring to let my parents fight her battles. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, called the court to order. My parents' lawyer presented their case first, painting a picture of me as an unstable, resentful daughter who had threatened them during a family disagreement. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes fear for their safety, he concluded. They believe their daughter's recent behavior represents a significant change in character and a potential danger to them and their grandchildren residing at the property. When it was Alexandra's turn, she calmly dismantled their narrative, piece by piece. Your Honor, this restraining order was not filed out of genuine fear. It was filed as a tactical maneuver in an ongoing property dispute, she began. Ms. Hayes is the rightful owner of the house in question, having designed and paid for it herself. She temporarily transferred the deed to her parents during a family health crisis, with the explicit understanding that it would be returned to her once her father recovered. She presented Daniel's affidavit, detailing what actually happened during the confrontation. Then she called Laura to testify about the conversations at the hospital where my parents had promised the transfer was temporary. And did Ms. Hayes at any point threaten her parents during that conversation at the house? Alexandra asked Laura. Absolutely not, Laura said firmly. Morgan was upset, yes, but she remained calm and reasonable throughout. If anything, her parents were the ones making demands and dismissing her concerns. My parents' lawyer tried to paint Laura as biased, suggesting she had taken my side in family disputes before, but Laura remained composed. I'm not taking sides, she told the court. I'm stating facts. I was there when they promised the transfer was temporary. I've known Morgan her entire life, and she has never been violent or threatening. This restraining order is based on false statements. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Looking directly at the judge, I told my story simply and honestly, how I had agreed to help during what I believed was a temporary financial crisis related to my father's health, only to discover they had moved my sister's family into my home and were refusing to honor our agreement. I never threatened anyone, I said clearly. I simply asked for my house back, and when they refused, I informed them that I would be seeking legal counsel. That's all. The judge listened attentively, occasionally glancing between me and my parents. When both sides had presented their cases, she called for a brief recess to review the evidence. Those 20 minutes were among the longest of my life. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom, Daniel's hand in mine, trying not to look at my parents, seated at the opposite end of the hallway. When we were called back in, the judge didn't mince words. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, and I find insufficient basis for this restraining order, she announced. The affidavits provided by Mr. Daniel Chen and Ms. Laura Hayes credibly contradict the allegations of threats or intimidation. Furthermore, this appears to be tangential to a property dispute that should be addressed in civil court, not through protective orders. She looked directly at my parents. The temporary restraining order is hereby dissolved, and I would caution both parties about making unsubstantiated claims in future filings. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. Alexandra squeezed my arm gently, a silent acknowledgement of our victory. As we left the courtroom, my mother approached, her expression a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps embarrassment at having her lies exposed so publicly. This doesn't change anything, she said in a low voice. The house is still in our names. For now, I replied calmly. But that's going to change too. She opened her mouth to respond, but Laura stepped between us. Patricia, I think you've done enough damage for one day. Go home. We'll see you in civil court. My mother's eyes narrowed, but she turned and walked away, my father following without a word. Outside the courthouse, the September sun felt warmer somehow, the air lighter. James gave me a quick hug before heading back to work, promising to call later. Laura lingered, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? She asked. I considered. The question. Getting there, I answered honestly. Thank you for standing up for me today. I know it couldn't have been easy to testify against your own sister. It was easier than watching her lie about you, Laura said firmly. I've stayed quiet too many times over the years, watching how they favor Eliza, how they take you for granted. Not anymore. As she walked to her car, I turned to Alexandra. What's next? Now we focus on the house, she said, her tone all business. The restraining order was a distraction. With that out of the way, we can file our complaint regarding the property transfer. I already have the paperwork prepared. Back at our apartment, Daniel ordered celebratory takeout while I called my boss to update him on the situation. I'd been vague about my family emergency until now, but with legal proceedings likely to require more time off, I needed to be honest. To my relief, Martin was understanding. Take whatever time you need, he said. The community center project can wait. Just keep me posted. After hanging up, I sat at our small kitchen table, scrolling through messages of support from Laura, James, and a few close friends I'd confided in. The contrast between their genuine concern and my immediate family's manipulations couldn't have been starker. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, setting a glass of wine in front of me. Family, I said. The ones we're born into versus the ones we choose. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. You know, my grandmother had a saying, blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. The words resonated deeply. Looking at Daniel, who had stood by me unflinchingly through this entire ordeal, and thinking of Laura and James who had shown up when it mattered most, I realized that family wasn't defined by who shared your DNA. It was defined by who showed up, who told the truth, who put your needs on equal footing with their own. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Opening it, I found a message from Connor, my sister's husband. Morgan, this is Connor. Using a friend's phone. We need to talk privately. Can we meet tomorrow? Just you and me. I showed the message to Daniel, unsure what to make of it. Could be a trap, he said cautiously. Your parents might be trying to get you to violate the terms of the restraining order somehow. The restraining order was just dismissed, I reminded him. True, but I still don't trust them. If you go, I'm coming with you. I agreed, then replied to Connor, Okay, coffee shop on Main St. 10 a.m. Daniel will be with me. The response came quickly. Fine, just don't tell Eliza or your parents, please. The secrecy was concerning, but also intriguing. What did Connor want to discuss that he couldn't say in front of his wife or my parents? The next morning, we arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. Connor walked in at exactly 10 hours, looking tired and tense. He spotted us immediately and made his way over, sliding into the chair across from me. Thanks for meeting me, he said, his voice low. What's this about, Connor? I asked, not bothering with small talk. He glanced around nervously before leaning forward. I want out of this whole situation. I never wanted to take your house, Morgan. That was all Eliza and your parents' idea. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. You're living in my house right now. I know, and I'm not proud of it. He ran a by, hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress. When I lost my job, things got desperate. We couldn't afford our place anymore, and with the kids. Eliza panicked. Your parents suggested the plan with your house, and it snowballed from there. And you went along with it, Daniel pointed out. Connor nodded, shame evident in his expression. I did. I'm not making excuses, but I thought it was temporary, just until I found another job. Then they started talking about adding our names to the deed, making it permanent. It didn't feel right. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. Why are you telling me this now? Because I found a job, he said. It's in Cincinnati, starting next month. Good salary, benefits, everything we need. I want to take it, Move my family there, start fresh. But Eliza refuses to leave the house. Your house. She and your parents are determined to stay put. The revelation hung between us. What exactly are you proposing? I asked carefully. I have information that could help your case, Connor said. Emails between your parents discussing how to make the transfer permanent from the beginning. Text messages where they planned to move us in before they even asked you to sign the papers. Evidence that your father's medical situation was never as dire as they claimed. My heart raced at the implications. You kept these? He nodded. I never felt right about how this went down. I saved everything, just in case. And you're willing to share this with me? Against your wife's wishes? Connor looked down at his hands. I love Eliza, but this situation is poisoning everything. The kids sense the tension. Your parents are constantly there, micromanaging our lives because they think they're protecting their investment. It's not healthy for anyone. I want my family to have a fresh start in our own place that we've earned honestly. I exchanged glances with Daniel, who gave a slight nod. If you give me these records, I said slowly, what do you want in return? Nothing illegal or unethical, Connor assured us quickly. Just, when you get your house back, give us a reasonable timeline to move out. Enough time to find a place in Cincinnati, get the kids transferred to schools there, and maybe, don't tell Eliza it was me who gave you the evidence. Let her think your lawyer found it some other way. It was a surprisingly reasonable request. I'd need to see the evidence first, I said. My lawyer would need to verify it. Of course. Connor pulled out a USB drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. It's all here. Emails, texts, even recordings of some conversations. I'm not proud of any of this, Morgan. I just want to make it right. As I took the drive, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication that my suspicions had been correct, but also sadness that my family's betrayal ran even deeper than I'd realized. I'll have my lawyer review this, I said. If it's as helpful as you say, you'll have your timeline. Connor nodded, relief evident in his posture. Thank you. And, Morgan, I'm sorry for all of it. After he left, Daniel and I sat in silence for a moment, processing the unexpected turn of events. Do you believe him? Daniel asked finally. I turned the USB drive over in my hand, considering. I think so. It feels genuine. And honestly, it makes sense. Connor always seemed uncomfortable with the situation whenever I saw them. This could change everything, Daniel said, hope threading through his voice. I nodded, a new determination settling over me. Let's find out. Alexandra's office was quieter than usual when we arrived the next morning. She had cleared her schedule to review Connor's evidence, understanding the potential impact it could have on our case. This is remarkable, she said, looking up from her computer after nearly an hour of examining the files. These emails are extremely explicit about their intentions. I leaned forward. How explicit? She turned the monitor so Daniel and I could see. On the screen was an email from my father to my mother, dated 2 weeks before his heart attack. Patricia, I spoke with Dr. Levine today. The tests show minor blockage, nothing that can't be managed with medication. But this might be the opportunity we need to solve Eliza's housing situation. If we present it as more serious to Morgan, we could ask her to transfer the house temporarily. Once it's in our names, we move Eliza and the family in. And by the time Morgan realizes what's happening, it will be too difficult to undo. My breath caught in my throat. They had planned it all from the beginning, using my father's minor health issue as leverage to manipulate me into giving up my house. Alexandra scrolled to another email. This one from my mother to Eliza, sent the day after I signed the transfer papers. It's done. Morgan signed everything over today. She thinks it's temporary, of course. But by the time she realizes otherwise, it will be too late. Start packing your things. I've already measured the master bedroom for your furniture. Each new email felt like another blow. The calculated deception, the casual dismissal of my rights, the assumption that I would eventually give in as I always had before, it was all laid out in black and white. "There's more," Alexandra said, clicking on an audio file. Connor recorded some of their conversations. My mother's voice filled the room. "Of course Morgan will be upset when she finds out. But what's she going to do? Sue her own family? She's never stood up to us before. She'll sulk for a while and then accept it, just like she always does." My father's voice responded, "Besides, it's not like she needs the house. She and Daniel can live anywhere. Eliza has the children to think about. Morgan will understand, eventually." I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of tears behind my lids. The casual certainty with which they had dismissed my feelings, my rights, my very personhood, it was overwhelming. "This changes everything," Alexandra said, her voice cutting through my thoughts. "With this evidence, we can file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further transfer of the property, and we have a much stronger case for fraud in inducing the original transfer. Your parents lied about the medical necessity. They lied about the temporary nature of the arrangement, and they conspired to permanently deprive you of your property." "What about the restraining order?" Daniel asked. "Can we use that against them too?" Alexandra nodded. "Absolutely. It demonstrates a pattern of deceptive practices to maintain control of the property. The judge has already recognized their claims as unsubstantiated. This strengthens our narrative that they're willing to lie and manipulate the legal system to achieve their goals." I sat back, trying to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. I never thought they would go this far. Planning it all, before Dad even had health issues, deliberately misleading me about the severity of his condition. "People can rationalize almost anything when they convince themselves they're acting for the right reasons," Alexandra said gently. "In their minds, helping your sister justified deceiving you." "It doesn't make it hurt any less," I whispered. "No," she agreed. "But it does make our legal case much stronger." She outlined our next steps: filing for an emergency injunction to freeze the property status, preparing a comprehensive complaint detailing the fraudulent inducement, and requesting a hearing as soon as possible. "Given the overwhelming evidence, I believe we can also ask for punitive damages," Alexandra added. "The level of deception here goes beyond a simple misunderstanding." The word damages brought me up short. "I don't want their money," I said firmly. "I just want my house back." Alexandra nodded. "That's your prerogative. But asking for damages strengthens our position for negotiation. We can always drop that request later if a satisfactory settlement is reached." As we left her office, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. The evidence confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't misunderstood or overreacted. But it also confirmed the painful truth that my own family had conspired against me, calculating my reaction, banking on my history of accommodation. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked as we walked to the car. "I'm thinking about all the times I gave in," I said slowly. "All the times I stepped aside for Eliza, made sacrifices for my parents, accepted less than I deserved because that's what family does. They counted on that pattern continuing forever." Daniel took my hand. "But this time, it's different." "Yes," I agreed. "This time it is." That evening, I received a text from Connor. "Did you look at the files? Is it enough?" I responded simply, "Yes. Thank you. We'll honor our agreement about the timeline." His reply came quickly. "Thank you. I'm sorry it came to this." I stared at those words for a long time. Sorry it came to this. As if the situation had evolved on its own, rather than through deliberate choices made by my family. Still, Connor had taken a step toward making things right. at potential cost to his relationship with his wife and in-laws. That counted for something. The next morning, Alexandra called with news. The judge has granted our emergency injunction. The property can't be transferred to anyone else while our case is pending, and we have a hearing date 2 weeks from today. That soon? I asked, surprised by the quick timeline. I emphasized the urgent nature of the situation, especially given the evidence of your parents' attempt to transfer the property to your sister. The judge agreed that time is of the essence. 2 weeks. In just 14 days, I would face my family in court, laying bare the full extent of their deception for a judge to evaluate. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. That afternoon, I drove to my office to collect some files I needed for a project I was working on remotely. As I was leaving the building, I nearly collided with Eliza in the parking lot. "Morgan," she said, her voice cold. "Fancy running into you here." I took a step back, maintaining distance between us. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk some sense into you," she said, one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly, a visual reminder of the pregnancy Laura had mentioned. "This lawsuit is tearing the family apart." "The lawsuit isn't what tore the family apart," I replied evenly. "The lies and manipulation did that." Her expression hardened. "Mom and Dad were just trying to help us. You know how hard it's been since Connor lost his job. We have 3 kids, another on the way. We needed somewhere stable to live." "And you could have asked me for help," I pointed out. "Instead, you all conspired to trick me out of my house." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, though her eyes shifted away from mine. "We were going to tell you eventually. We just needed to get settled first." "Settled?" I repeated. "In my house, the one I designed and paid for." "You always have to make everything about you," Eliza snapped. "Some of us have real responsibilities, Morgan. Children who need stability, security. What do you need the house for anyway? Just you and Daniel? You could live anywhere." It was the same dismissive logic from the recorded conversation, now coming directly from my sister. As if my needs, my rights, my very property were somehow less legitimate because I didn't have children. "My needs matter too, Eliza," I said. Quietly. "My life matters too, and that house is mine. I worked for it, saved for it, designed it. The fact that you and our parents think you can just take it because you want it more, that says everything about how you see me." Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps a moment of genuine reflection, or maybe just calculation. "Connor." "Got a job offer," she said abruptly, "in Cincinnati." "That's good news," I replied, careful to hide any reaction that might reveal I already knew. "A fresh start could be good for all of you." "He wants us to move," she continued. "Leave the house, leave Mom and Dad, start over somewhere new." "And you don't want to?" She looked away. "It's complicated. The kids are settled here. Mom and Dad are here. The schools are good, and the house. It's perfect for us." "It's perfect because I designed it to be perfect," I reminded her. "For me." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "So you're really going through with this? Taking your own sister to court?" "I'm taking action to reclaim what's rightfully mine," I corrected. "The fact that my own family put me in this position is on you, not me." She shook her head, that familiar look of disappointment settling on her features, the same look our parents had perfected over the years. "I expected better from you, Morgan." The comment struck me as so absurd that I actually laughed. That's rich, coming from someone living in a house they tricked the rightful owner out of. Her face flushed. "You'll regret this. When your nieces and nephew don't know you, when Mom and Dad are gone and you've destroyed your relationship with your only sister, you'll regret choosing a house over family." "I'm not choosing a house over family," I said firmly. "I'm choosing self-respect over exploitation. There's a difference. I walked past her to my car, her words following me. This isn't over, Morgan. Not by a long shot. As I drove away, I realized my hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground. With my sister without doubting myself, without that familiar twist of guilt in my stomach. It felt like growth. When I told Daniel about the encounter, he was concerned. Do you think she knows about Connor giving us the evidence? I don't think so, I replied. She mentioned his job offer, but she seemed more focused on convincing me to drop the lawsuit. Be careful, he warned. If they get desperate enough, there's no telling what they might do. His words proved prophetic the very next day. I was working from our apartment when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found 2 police officers standing in the hallway. Morgan Hayes? One asked. Yes, I replied, confusion and alarm rising simultaneously. We need to speak with you about a complaint that's been filed. May we come in? I stepped aside, mind racing. Daniel was at work, and I was alone facing whatever new tactic my family had devised. What's this about? I asked as the officers entered our small living room. We received a report that you've been harassing your sister, Eliza Holloway, the female officer explained. Specifically, that you've been sending threatening messages regarding her children. The accusation was so outlandish that for a moment I couldn't even respond. That's completely false, I finally managed. I haven't contacted my sister at all except for a brief in-person conversation yesterday that she initiated. Can I see your phone, please? The male officer asked. Not without a warrant, I replied automatically, thanking whatever instinct had made me consult with Alexandra about my legal rights after the restraining order fiasco. But I can tell you that I haven't sent any threatening messages to my sister or anyone else. This is another false accusation, just like the restraining order my parents filed against me last week, which was dismissed by the judge, by the way. The officers exchanged glances. You've had other legal issues with your family recently? The female officer asked. Yes, I said. Deciding transparency was the best approach. We're in the middle of a property dispute. I own a house that I temporarily signed over to my parents during a health crisis. They moved my sister's family in without my consent and are now refusing to return the property. We have a court date in 2 weeks. This is clearly another attempt to discredit me before the hearing. I pulled out my phone and opened my messaging app. Look, I'm happy to show you that there are no threats in any messages I've sent to my sister. In fact, I haven't texted her at all in weeks. The officers reviewed my phone, noting the lack of any recent communication with Eliza. The female officer made a note in her pad. We'll need to follow up on this, she said. But based on what we're seeing, there doesn't appear to be evidence supporting the complaint. After they left, I called Alexandra immediately, my hands finally beginning to shake with delayed reaction. They're escalating, she said grimly after I explained what had happened. This is good for our case, but concerning for your personal safety. They're showing a pattern of using false accusations to try to discredit you and potentially create legal problems. What should I do? I asked. Document everything, and I mean everything. Install security cameras at your apartment. Record any encounters with your family members. Save every text, email, or voicemail. And consider filing for a protective order of your own. We have evidence of their pattern of harassment now. The suggestion took me aback. A protective order against my own parents and sister? Morgan, they've filed a false restraining order against you and now made a false police report. These aren't the actions of people who have your best interests at heart. They're trying to hurt you because you're standing up for yourself. She was right, of course. My family had crossed lines I never imagined they would. The realization was painful but clarifying. That evening, Daniel and I installed a security camera at our apartment door. We also set up an app that would automatically record any phone conversations, legal in our state with one-party consent. I never thought it would come to this, I said as we finished the installation. Recording conversations with my own family, installing security cameras because I'm afraid of what they might do next. Daniel pulled me into a hug. It's not your fault, he reminded me. You didn't create this situation. I know, I sighed. But I enabled it for years by always giving in, always accommodating, never standing firm on boundaries. If I had pushed back earlier, maybe it wouldn't have escalated to this point. Or maybe it would have, Daniel countered. You can't know that. What matters is that you're standing up for yourself now. The next morning, I had just finished a video call with a client when my phone rang. The screen displayed my father's name. I hesitated, then remembered Alexandra's advice to document everything. I activated the recording app and answered. Morgan, my father said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied cautiously. This has gone too far, he continued. Police reports, lawyers, court dates. This isn't how families should resolve things. The irony was almost too much. I agree, Dad. Families shouldn't lie to each other, manipulate each other, or file false reports against each other either. He sighed heavily. We may have handled things poorly, but our intentions were good. Eliza and the kids needed a stable home, and your house was sitting empty most of the time with your work travel. My house wasn't sitting empty, I corrected. It's where I live when I'm not traveling for work. And if you were concerned about Eliza's housing situation, you could have simply asked me for help. Instead, you lied about your health to trick me into signing over my property, then moved her in without my knowledge or consent. We did what we thought was best for the family as a whole, he insisted. No, you did what was best for Eliza, at my expense, as usual. There was a long pause. We'd like to propose a compromise, he said finally. You drop the lawsuit, we keep the house for another year to give Eliza and Connor time to find something else, and then we transfer it back to you. No more legal battles, no more family division. I considered his offer for a moment. A year ago, I might have accepted it, grateful for any resolution that promised peace, willing to sacrifice my own interests to maintain family harmony. But that was before I understood the depths of their deception. I'm sorry, Dad, but that's not going to work, I said firmly. I've seen the emails, heard the recordings. I know you never intended to give the house back. This was a calculated plan from the beginning. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. What emails? What? Recordings? The ones where you and Mom discussed using your minor health issue as leverage to get me to sign over the house? The ones where you specifically said you'd wait until it was too late for me to do anything about it? The conversations where you said I'd sulk for a while, but eventually accept it like I always do? Those emails and recordings. The silence that followed was deafening. When my father finally spoke, his voice had hardened. You've been spying on us? No, I said simply. But it seems someone in your circle has a conscience. Connor, he growled. That ungrateful. It doesn't matter who, I cut in. What matters is that I have evidence of your conspiracy to defraud me. Evidence that will be presented in court in 10 days unless you voluntarily transfer the house back to me immediately and provide a reasonable timeline for Eliza's family to find new housing. You would really do this to your own sister, with a baby on the way? The familiar guilt tactic slid off me like water. Eliza's pregnancy doesn't entitle her to my house, Dad, and Connor has a good job offer that would provide stability for their family. This isn't about hurting Eliza. It's about reclaiming what's rightfully mine. I never thought you'd put property above family, he said, disappointment heavy in his voice. And I never thought my family would conspire to steal from me, I countered. Yet here we are. After hanging up, I forwarded the recording to Alexandra, who called back almost immediately. "This is excellent," she said. "His reaction to your mention of the emails and recordings is essentially an admission, and his attempt to negotiate shows they know their position is weak." He seemed genuinely shocked that I had evidence, I noted. "That's typical in cases like this," Alexandra explained. "They never expected you to fight back effectively. They underestimated you, Morgan." Her words resonated with me. My entire life, my family had underestimated me, my resolve, my strength, my sense of self-worth. They had counted on my compliance, my desire to keep the peace, my willingness to put everyone else's needs before my own. But people can change. I had changed. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Alexandra assembled our evidence, coached me for potential questions from the judge, and filed additional motions based on the false police report. Daniel took time off work to attend the hearing with me. Laura and James promised to be there, as well, providing moral support and additional testimony if needed. The night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. I sat on our small balcony, watching the city lights blink in the distance, thinking about all that had led to this moment. Daniel found me there around midnight, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders before sitting beside me. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Not about the lawsuit. I know that's the right thing to do. I'm just sad, I guess. Sad that it came to this. Sad that my own family values me so little that they thought nothing of taking something I worked years for." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's okay to grieve the relationship you wish you had with them, even while you fight for what's right." "I keep thinking about something my high school volleyball coach used to say," I mused. "Your worth isn't determined by how much you give away. It's established by what you refuse to give up." Daniel smiled. "Wise coach." "I gave away too. Much for too long," I continued. "My time, my money, my needs, my voice. I thought that's what love looked like. Constant sacrifice. But real love doesn't exploit. It doesn't take without asking. It doesn't dismiss your needs as unimportant." "No," Daniel agreed, "it doesn't." I leaned my head against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I know I'm doing the right thing. Not just for me, but for them too, in a way. They need to learn they can't manipulate and lie to get what they want." "That's growth," Daniel said simply. "For all of you." Morning came with a clarity I hadn't expected. I dressed carefully in a simple navy dress, applied minimal makeup, and pulled my hair back into a neat bun. Professional, composed, dignified, the opposite of the unstable daughter my parents had tried to portray. The courthouse was busier than I expected for a Tuesday morning. Alexandra met us in the lobby, her confidence reassuring. Laura and James arrived moments later, both offering hugs and words of encouragement. "I'm proud of you," Laura whispered in my ear. "This takes courage." We made our way to the assigned courtroom, finding seats near the front. My parents and their lawyer were already there, along with Eliza. Connor was noticeably absent, which didn't surprise me. The tension in the room was palpable, made worse by the confined space and the knowledge that family secrets were about to be aired publicly. My mother caught my eye briefly before looking away, her expression unreadable. My father stared straight ahead, jaw set in a stubborn line I knew all too well. Eliza kept her gaze fixed on her hands, folded protectively, over her slightly rounded belly. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. After the preliminary introductions, Alexandra presented our case first, methodically laying out the evidence of fraudulent inducement, the false medical emergency, the conspiracy to permanently deprive me of my property, and the pattern of harassment. That followed when I attempted to reclaim what was mine. She played selected recordings and displayed key emails on the courtroom monitor, each piece of evidence landing like a stone in still water, ripples of reaction spreading through the room. I watched my parents' faces as their own words were played back to them, the calculated deception laid bare for all to see. My father's lawyer attempted to paint the situation as a family misunderstanding, arguing that while communications may have been unclear, there was no malicious intent. He suggested that the property transfer was meant to help all family members, including me, by ensuring the house remained in the family during uncertain times. The judge listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions of both sides. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and directly, explaining how I had worked for years to afford the house, how I had designed it myself, and how I had agreed to the temporary transfer only to help during what I believed was a medical emergency. "And at any point," the judge asked, "did you agree to permanently give up your home for your sister's family to live in?" "No, Your Honor," I replied firmly. I was explicitly told the transfer was temporary, just until my father recovered. I continued to pay the mortgage, property taxes, and utilities after the transfer, demonstrating my understanding that I remained the de facto owner, despite the temporary legal change. When my father took the stand, his testimony was less steady. Confronted with his own emails and recordings, he struggled to explain the discrepancies between his public statements and his private communications. "You said in this email that you intended to wait until it was too late for your daughter to reclaim her property," the judge noted. "What exactly did you mean by that?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "I meant, we hoped that once she saw how happy Eliza and the children were in the house, she would willingly let them stay. Morgan has always been generous with family." "So you were counting on her generosity," the judge clarified, "while deliberately misleading her about your intentions." "We were trying to solve a family housing crisis," he insisted. "Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions for the good of all their children." The judge's expression remained neutral, but her next question cut to the heart of the matter. "Mr. Hayes, would you say that your daughters are equally valued in your family?" The question seemed to catch my father off guard. "Of course," he said automatically. "We love both our daughters." "That wasn't my question," the judge noted. "I asked if they were equally valued, if their needs, their rights, their property were given equal weight in your family decisions." My father didn't answer immediately. In that pause, in that telling silence, the truth hung in the air for everyone to see. After both sides had presented their cases, the judge called a brief recess to review all the evidence before making her ruling. Those 30 minutes were among the longest of my life. I sat in the hallway with Daniel, Laura, and James, trying not to look at my parents and Eliza huddled with their lawyer at the other end of the corridor. "You did great in there," Laura assured me. "Your testimony was clear, dignified, and honest." "The evidence is overwhelming," James added. "I don't see how they could rule against you." When we were called back in, the judge didn't waste time with preliminaries. "Having reviewed all the evidence presented today," she began, "I find clear and convincing proof that the property transfer from Morgan Hayes to Thomas and Patricia Hayes was obtained through fraudulent inducement. The defendants misrepresented the severity of Mr. Hayes's medical condition and the temporary nature of the arrangement, with documented intent to permanently deprive the plaintiff of her property." My heart leapt as she continued. "I hereby order that the property be transferred back to Morgan Hayes within 30 days. Further, given the evidence of harassment and the filing of false reports, I am issuing a no-contact order between the plaintiff and the defendants for a period of 6 months, with the exception of communications necessary to facilitate the property transfer, which must be conducted through counsel." She looked directly at my parents. "The court recognizes that the defendant's daughter, Eliza Holloway, and her family are currently residing in the property. To prevent undue hardship, They shall have 60 days from today's date to vacate the premises and find alternative housing. The judge then addressed me. Ms. Hayes, while the court acknowledges the significant emotional and financial harm you've suffered, I encourage you to consider the welfare of your nieces and nephew during this transition period. They are innocent parties in this dispute. Because it was mine, I said simply. Because I worked for it, designed it, loved it. Because taking it without my consent was wrong, regardless of who needed it more in your eyes. Because my needs and rights matter too, even if you've never seen it that way. She studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You've changed, she said finally. You're harder now. Not harder, I corrected. Stronger. There's a difference. Outside, Connor honked the horn, a signal that they were ready to leave. My mother gathered her handbag, her movements stiff with unspoken emotion. I suppose this is goodbye then, she said formally. The no-contact order expires next month, but I don't imagine we'll be hearing from you. I thought about her words, about the finality they implied. That depends on you, I said honestly. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if it's based on mutual respect and honesty. I won't go back to being the daughter you can take from without asking, whose needs always come second. She seemed startled by my response, perhaps having expected either capitulation or permanent estrangement. I'll think about that, she said finally. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Not because all was resolved, far from it, but because I had stated my truth clearly, without anger or bitterness, and stood firm in my worth. Daniel and Connor returned from loading the last of the boxes, Connor holding out a set of keys. That's everything, he said. House keys, mailbox key, garage door opener. I accepted them with a nod of thanks. Good luck in Cincinnati, Connor. I mean that. Thanks, he replied, a hint of genuine warmth in his voice. And Morgan? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Standing up for yourself, I mean. It's something I'm trying to learn to do myself. After they had all gone, Connor, driving the minivan with the kids, Eliza following in her car, my parents in theirs, Daniel and I stood alone in the empty house that was finally completely mine again. So, he said, slipping an arm around my waist, where do we start? I looked around at the bare walls, the scuffed floors, the spaces that would need to be reclaimed and renewed. From scratch, I said, we make it ours again, one room at a time. Over the next few months, that's exactly what we did. We refinished the hardwood floors, repainted every wall, restored the custom features that had been altered or removed. We replaced the heavy draperies with the simple linen curtains I had always loved, allowing natural light to flood the rooms once more. My office was rebuilt, more functional than before, with a new standing desk and improved lighting. The master bedroom returned to its serene palette of soft greens and blues, a sanctuary rather than a showcase. The nursery was transformed into a guest room, ready to welcome friends and chosen family. When the renovations were complete, we hosted a housewarming party. Laura and James, colleagues from work, friends who had supported us through the ordeal. The house filled with laughter and genuine warmth, the kind that comes from relationships built on mutual respect and care. As the evening wound down, Laura found me in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. I talked to your mother yesterday, she said casually. I paused, a wine glass in hand. Oh? She asked how you were doing, seemed genuinely interested. I absorbed this information, neither dismissing it nor reading too much into it. That's something, I guess. Laura nodded. Small steps. She mentioned that Eliza and Connor are trying marriage counseling. Apparently he put his foot down about the Cincinnati move. They're going at the end of the month. Good for him, I said, meaning it. That job is a real opportunity. Your mom also said something interesting, Laura continued. She said she's been thinking about what you said that last day, about mutual respect and honesty. I think it might have gotten through, at least a little. I smiled slightly, not allowing myself to hope too much, but not closing the door either. Time will tell. Later that night, after all the guests had gone and Daniel was asleep upstairs, I sat alone in the living room, looking around at the space we had reclaimed and renewed. The house was beautiful again, but more importantly, it was ours, a reflection of our tastes, our values, our vision for the future we were building together. My phone chimed with a text message. Checking it, I was surprised to see Eliza's name on the screen, the first direct communication since the court ruling. The twins miss their aunt. When we're settled in Cincinnati, maybe you could visit sometime. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was an opening, a small acknowledgement that the bonds of family, though strained, weren't entirely broken. I typed a simple reply. I'd like that. Setting the phone aside, I curled up on the couch Daniel and I had chosen together, wrapped in the soft throw blanket Laura had given us as a housewarming gift. Through the windows, I could see stars scattered across the clear night sky. Distant, constant reminders that even after the darkest nights, light remains. The journey had been painful, the cost higher than I could have anticipated. But sitting in my reclaimed home, surrounded by the life I had built through determination and courage, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Not just for the house itself, though I loved every inch of it, but for what the fight had taught me, that my needs mattered, that my voice deserved to be heard, that standing up for myself wasn't selfish but necessary. Some people might never understand why I had fought so hard for this house, why I couldn't simply let it go and start over elsewhere. They might call it stubbornness, pettiness, or worse. But I knew the truth. This house represented more than wood and stone and glass. It represented my right to keep what I had earned, to be treated as an equal, to have my boundaries respected. It represented the woman I had become, one who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. As I drifted toward sleep, a phrase from my childhood surfaced in my mind, something my grandfather used to say when faced with difficult choices. The things most worth having are rarely the easiest to keep. He had been talking about his farm, about the years of drought and hardship he had endured to maintain the land he loved. But the wisdom applied just as well to my house, my self-respect, my newfound strength. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Some boundaries once established must be maintained. Some victories, hard-won and painful, change not just your circumstances, but your very sense of self. This house was mine again. But more importantly, so was my life. Shaped by my choices, guided by my values, no longer defined by others' expectations or demands. And that, I realized as sleep finally claimed me, was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.